Welcome to Together Unprocessed, where 5 friends from across the world share real conversations about food, healing, and life. Let's get started. Okay, here we go. Good morning. How's everyone today?
Good.
Good.
Yeah, good.
Okay, so before we start our episode, let's do a quick walk around the room and, again, let everybody know who we are, where we are, and whatever else you want to add. So I'm going to start with you, Ash. Go ahead.
Ashley, and I'm from Tasmania, Australia, and it is 9:37 p.m. And yeah, it's starting to get, days are getting cooler, so we're heading into winter.
Nice. Like winter is our suntanning weather here in Canada, but
Yeah.
Go ahead, Hugo.
Well, now we are experiencing warmth in the northern hemisphere. So, I'm in Estonia. I'm Hugo, and it's past 2 p.m. right now. So, and the temperature is much nicer. Instead of minus, just a couple weeks back, we have plus degrees and plus 10, 15, and it's pretty nice in the sun.
Nice. Very nice. And I'm Kim, and I'm in Ontario, Canada, and we're starting to get some pretty nice weather. I've mowed the grass 3 or 4 times, so that's all that matters to me. And it's 7:38 a.m. in the morning. Okay, today we're going to do a series on blood work, because it seems to be what we found is all the communities that we have been in, and a lot of times asking different questions, learning different things, whether it's carnivore, keto, even whole foods and stuff like that. One of the number one questions that come back or that is presented is people are not understanding their blood work. So we felt that we could do a series to help everybody understand when they go in for their blood work, why certain blood work is ordered, and what is missing from the blood work that should be there. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about blood markers your doctor isn't explaining, and why it's not automatically ordered. Doesn't matter what country you're in. If you're in Canada, Australia, Estonia, sorry, Hugo, they don't order it. So today we're going to start off with Hugo, and the first thing we're going to talk about the blood marker is A1C. What is it and why it's important? So Hugo, I'm turning it all over to you, buddy.
Oh, wow, the honors. Okay.
Well, hey.
Well, A1C, I think probably most people have seen it on their blood work when they've gotten it, and it's routinely checked, in yearly or biannual blood panels. It is a useful marker. What it stands for is glycated hemoglobin. And what that means is, how many percentages of the hemoglobin molecules are glycated inside the red blood cells. And they give it in percentage for that reason. So usually it's the range can, it can have a wide range, but usually in the normal range it's 4 to 5.5. And it is a useful marker. It's dependent on how long your red blood cells live for, which they estimate. They don't actually measure how long they last. So then you have to look at this marker in a different way too, because it's not a direct measurement of your average blood sugar over the 90 days that they say, because they cannot measure that with the current method they're using. So they're estimating, they're guessing that your red blood cells live about 90 to 100 days, but that can actually vary quite a bit, right? If your red blood cells die quicker, you would have lower A1C, but you could have higher blood sugar in that case, and it would equal the same amount as in another person. Or you can have longer living red blood cells and appear to have more glycation or more elevated blood sugar, when in fact you actually don't. So this is the point of contention in the medical community too, and I don't think there's much to contend here with, because it's the science on this is really clear, especially since A1C is an actual it's an estimation. If you don't have a glucometer or you're not doing routine blood pricks of your blood sugar, you don't know the average truly. And yeah, but it doesn't mean that this isn't useful marker, because usually when you have an elevation of above 6 millimoles per liter, it's too much. I think there's different units for A1C, but it's like 6%, or if it goes above 6, it's probably not the best, but it's all context dependent. So that would require further testing to ensure it's okay. Like having a fructosamine panel, or just having more blood tests to maybe get a more accurate picture, and maybe having a glucometer, because that is more relevant. And with A1C, it's like a weighted calculation, so the last 30 days are gonna have the most impact, then the last 60 days, the 30 days preceding that, and then the lowest impact is like 90 days ago, right? 90 to 120 days. So it is weighted, so it's worth taking that into consideration when you have an elevation in A1C. It could just be because you might be eating more carbohydrates recently, right? Or something else might have changed. So it's good to have that skeptical viewpoint of this, because it is not the end all be all. There are other more useful markers, but this is like a wide gauge of how your blood sugar is doing, and that's how it should be viewed as, not as the end all be marker for like diabetes, for example, that they actually use. And that's pretty much it on that. There's more on A1C, but that's for another discussion.
Another one, yeah. So Hugo, when we're talking about A1C and stuff like that, can you just break that down a little bit more, explaining like A1C? It talks about how the sugar has attached to the red blood cells, and that's really what's actually being measured.
Yeah, it's a simplification, but it actually attaches to the hemoglobin molecule that is actually carrying the oxygen. But yeah, like a simplified way, it's basically how much blood sugar has attached to your red blood cells. And it is dependent how much how much carbohydrates you intake too, because that can cause an elevation and spikes and rises. So it is dependent on that. And it's also dependent on stress and other factors, because blood sugar is varying. When you wake up, usually it spikes too, because cortisol spikes, and then it promotes the rise of glucose. So in the morning you can have an elevated rate compared to evening time, but it's totally fine if it's within like the normal range, the homeostatic range for yourself, not necessarily compared to other people, because it depends, right?
So with the A1C too, one of the things that I think is important that people need to understand, for example, a carnivore or somebody who's on keto, they go in to have their blood work done, their A1C is usually within the normal range. And one of the biggest reasons why is because of their diet, right? And now if they were to probably, like say the day before, they decide, well, the heck with it, I'm going to have some ice cream and some of the good stuff, you know what? It's going to reflect on that blood work, because the A1C, again, going back to the sugar, makes a difference. So
in this case it won't have that much of an impact, but it will definitely have an impact on the insulin, the blood sugar, the lipid panel, and rest of the markers.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, this is just one example. The reason why we want to talk about it is it's not a true representation of what's really happening in your body at that particular moment in time. So one of the things that we can get a better reading of what your body is doing is getting what we call a fasting insulin test. And I'm going to turn that over to Ashley so she can talk about that, because now we're going to narrow it down from the A1C and we're going to go into the fasting insulin. why that's important, and it's hardly ever ordered on basic blood work. All yours, Ash.
Yes, this one's close to my heart. Well, all three of these are coming from a family where diabetes does run through it, and also insulin resistance. So fasting insulin, as Kim said, is hardly ever ordered by doctors. And to be honest, we didn't even know about it when my husband was diagnosed with diabetes, and we tried for at least a year to try to get it down. And it wasn't until somebody said to me, has he had a fasting insulin test, that we then started learning more about it, and obviously more in the carnivore community with doctors like Professor Ben Bickman and a few other ones who it has become a standard one that they do order. But doctors hardly ever do order this one. And to me, it is one of the first ones that should be ordered before the A1Cs and fasting glucose, because this test actually is going to be the one that catches things before you actually see the elevated A1Cs or fasting glucose, because the fasting insulin is what measures how hard your pancreas is working to keep your glucose levels normal. And that's what we should be looking at first, because it's going to take years of your pancreas working hard behind the scenes before it shows that. I've just had that case now, and you can see it in a lot of people walking around. Is my daughter's been having a lot of symptoms. She's 17 years old, where she's getting highs and lows, and we didn't know what was going on. We went into the doctor, who ordered the standard A1C fasting glucose, and I insisted on a fasting insulin because of my experience now with my husband, and also obviously everything we've learned. And when we went to go get those results, they looked at the two A1Cs and the fasting glucose, and they said, no, she's fine, there's nothing wrong. But they then said, however, the test you asked me to order was very high, and I wasn't sure what it was all about. And that just all of a sudden just made me like go, are you serious? Because that was the first thing. And from me ordering that test, I've been able to determine and catch it early at 17 that her pancreas is already starting to work harder than it should. Not through fault, not just through what she's eating, but also through stress, anxiety, and a whole lot of other things that play a part in it. But that's how important this test is. And that's why, just we can now step in at this age to change those outcomes for her future down the line. Whereas had we listened to that doctor and not got the test, she could be in the same situation in 20 years' time when diagnosed with full-on blown-on diabetes. And I think that's where a lot of people in this world today are. When you look around, they go, oh, but my doctor said my A1C and my fasting glucose are all fine. But they're not seeing what's running in the background and how hard your pancreas is actually working to bring those sugars down, from what we've discussed in the last two episodes with those sugars, and that's the hard part, and doctors are very, very reluctant to order this test, and it should change. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Hugo so he can explain more of the scientific side of it, because that's just my mom term because of what we've had to deal with over the last few years.
And before we turn it over to you, Hugo, just quickly, I want to interject. Like, people don't understand that, our body is going to compensate, period. Whatever it is, and our body wants us to be healthy. And it's one of the most miraculous, it's like the eighth wonder of the world. People are like, they're still, scientists are figuring out what the body can do. So when you're like Ashley was just talking about the insulin, it could be elevated for years and years and years before you don't have a clue what's happening, and then all of a sudden you're insulin resistant, then all of a sudden you're diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and now we have an issue. That's why we're talking about fasting insulin. So now over to you there, Hugo, all yours.
Yeah, that's very true. I wanted to reflect back on the experience with doctors, because I ordered a fasting insulin test, but I got a lot of pushback. It's commonly not subsidized even by the health system. So, I would have paid for it out of pocket because it's not actually that expensive, but it is very valuable. And, I think it's the single most probably blood marker you're ever going to do, like if you're going to do it.
Yep.
So
I agree.
I
That's all
agree.
I want to say, because it reveals so much about your metabolic state, no matter your age. Uh, but
It's the first
regarding
test I
the
recommend.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And it's your right to ask for it. I don't care what country you're in. And I just had
I
this
agree.
situation myself. I asked for fasting insulin. I got pushback, like big pushback, to the point that it wasn't even ordered because it was I was told, "Well, Kim, you're not diabetic." Well, who gives a shit if I'm diabetic or not? I want to know what my body's doing. And if I'm taking, being proactive instead of reactive, which is what a lot of what our healthcare system is all about, then why would you not order it for me? And I'm the same as Hugo. I've paid thousands now for blood work. I don't care because it's my body, my life, and
Yeah,
I want to be proactive about it. So, I mean, one of the things I found out too at pickleball actually was a few people said, if you ask for it, they have to give it to you. So now when I make my next appointment, which is coming up, I'm getting my fasting insulin done. So
yeah,
stay
I've had
strong.
a few in Australia. As far well, it's been covered so far. However, there is like you said, there is pushback, and I've got a lot of girlfriends and friends who've gone and asked for that test, and they haven't been so lucky to get it because the doctor has pushed back.
Crazy.
But I am, so I just go in now, and I know the tests that I want, and those are the ones that I order, and I'm just and thank goodness I did. And the only reason, like I said, I know these is from learning from you guys and also from the doctors that we follow in the carnivore community who stress how important it is. But just one thing on that, if you are diabetic and you are taking insulin, so if you're type 1 and you're on insulin, it's better to then get a C-peptide test because that's going to give you a more
yeah,
accurate description to see whether your pancreas is even producing the amount that you need, whether, at all, or whether it's not producing any, because that's what we have to order with my husband because he is on insulin, so he can't do the fasting insulin. But for just the average person, this is the first test I would be ordering.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
It's a good point. The C-peptide usually doesn't get attention, but that's really useful for I think type 1 diabetics, because you can differentiate between the insulin you take in and the insulin that's produced by your body. So because C-peptide, it kind of mimics the insulin production, so you can have that baseline, you can compare the two. So I think that's for type 1 diabetics. I think this is useful. And when it comes to type 1 diabetes too, like there's ways to reduce your insulin requirements too. It's through diet. If you eat less sugary
yeah,
foods,
for sure.
less carbohydrates, then you need less insulin too. And the insulin too is like a blunt instrument. The way that it's being administered, right? Because it's like slow acting or fast acting. It's not exactly equal to what the body produces and at those specific intervals and all of that. So it's more like it's like a more reactive approach. So I think a better solution is just to reduce that insulin requirement, in your body, and then administer as much as you need and not more, because insulin is important. It has downstream effects. And elevated insulin, it's not talked about much, but it can contribute to a lot of chronic diseases. Because insulin is, it has so many roles, and I'm not gonna get into it here, but it is important.
Yeah, yeah,
But
for sure.
what I wanted to say about the scientific part of insulin, it's like it's produced by your pancreas, the beta islet cells. Their function primarily is to produce insulin for the rest of the body. And if you measure insulin in the blood, you're measuring the activity of those cells too and the output they have. So this goes without saying, but with any organ, like overproduction is not optimal. Like if it has to do extra work to compensate, it's not optimal for the body to do that. It should actually produce something in the appropriate amounts and when it's needed. And so if you have overburdening of the pancreas, that's not optimal. And it can cause diseases later on in a few years or maybe even decades. Depends on the person. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Stress in the body, and it's so many different ways, right? And it's like, it'll come to a point where your body says, I can't do it anymore, you know? And that's when we get into insulin resistant and stuff like that. And, just on what you're saying there, Hugo, is, we have come across, you mentioned diet, which is so important. And that's something that we've all learned in the last, 3-4 years, is how important diet has changed our lives, right? Like I was insulin resistant on the verge of type 2 diabetes. Not anymore. And it's so important. We have seen hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people reverse type 2 diabetes that apparently you cannot do. And all of it was through diet, And yes, we advocate for carnivore. We advocate for keto and, anyone just starting out, whole foods. But we encourage you to look at your diet as well, because that all goes back into your control.
I'm just going to point out something else as well, is it's not an old person, that you're getting when you're older. It's getting picked up when you're older, but it starts when you're younger. It's starting in our kids. There are kids that are 8 years old that are now, starting to be pre-diabetic, type 2, all these different things, but it's not getting caught early enough, and I'm just lucky that I'm on top of it, and I've recognized the symptoms in my daughter, but her pancreas is overproducing insulin. So you're going from the high to this low, this constant yo-yo, especially with what you're eating, when your body's got enough, it's okay when you are eating the sugary and the carbs. But when you're then going to just eat meat or something high fatty, your body is then producing so much insulin, you're having those then low. So it's like this false, almost like you've injected yourself with insulin.
Right.
So that she's going from a high to basically fainting because she's gone so low. She's done her blood where she's taken her readings, and they 1.8 or 2. And it's just because she hasn't eaten anything.
Yeah.
Because her pancreas is working so hard, we're having these highs and lows.
Yeah.
And so many people and kids are out there doing this, are feeling like this, but they don't know what they are, because when they're going to the doctor, they're getting told that their A1C is fine.
Yeah. Which is why we're
You're
doing
not
this
diabetic.
series. Yeah, exactly. Because, you can prevent this, like you said, even in your children, like start now. And we talk about awareness, and education so important, and that's what we're hoping to bring to you today. And I'm going to put a plug here for someone, my fellow Canadian, who I absolutely have such admiration from, and I probably have learned the most about insulin resistance, is Dr. Ben Bickman. And if you want to read a book, the best book to read is Why We Get Sick. And he just breaks it down so beautiful and straightforward. And, Dr. Ben Bickman, exactly. He's probably one of the best out there. And another one that breaks it down very well, too, is Dr. Bart Kay as well. I mean, these two guys are just brilliant. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And I would actually mention Paul Mason, too, when you find him. When you find him on the interwebs, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I could listen to Dr. Paul Mason forever. I really could. I mean, this is a guy that he won't just give you the synopsis or the top, or he dives and he goes deep and he'll break it down. He takes you
into a journey. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Journey of discovery and, going over the science, and he tries his best to make it clearer too. It's, it is technical, but it's a lot of it's also, I think, approachable. So. For
sure. Yeah. Yeah. Someday. That's one of our goals, is to get Dr. Ben Bickman and Dr. Paul Mason on here for the interview. So if anybody listening to this knows them, send them this.
Yeah.
Okay, so, now we've talked about, fasting insulin. We talked about A1C, and you've heard us mention a few times the fasting glucose. So how about you break that down for everybody there, Hugo?
Fasting glucose is... as the name implies, it's taken when you're fasted. Usually it's 8 to 12 hours. But, with taking all these measurements, it's actually important to keep it consistent. We didn't mention it, but, it's worth keeping. Like when you're doing the blood test, do it at the same time. Do the same activities if you can. Keep exercise minimal, all of that, and most
sex.
important is fasting.
Sex is important too.
Well,
It's
most
true.
important is most important is fasting. Not actually eating. And that includes drinks too. Not having your coffee or your tea. That's often with sugar. Just skipping those is important, and they don't stress this enough with the blood test, and that's one of the main issues too. It's not a reliable reading if you're eating that morning, so it's good to keep that in mind. I just wanted to caveat that. But fasting glucose is it's taken when you're fasted. I think it's more useful in combination with the other markers like fasting insulin and maybe A1C. But fasting insulin is the most important because when you have those two markers, you have the baseline. At that, it's like when they take your blood work, it's a snapshot in time of that particular moment.
Right.
And they're measuring both glucose and insulin, so you can correlate the two. It's not like a hard guarantee, because the demands of the body are changing constantly through each moment in time, and it's individual for each person. So if you have the same levels as another person, it doesn't matter because it's not the same. It will not have the same effects because each of your cells is basically, it's like a complex system working on its own, and they have different needs and different ongoing machinery there. So I just wanted to say that. For the glucose part, it's usually done too, and it is useful test, but definitely get it with insulin. And once you have those two, you can move on to something called HOMA-IR, which is homeostatic insulin resistance. It's also an estimate. There's like a magic number in the formula, but I think it's useful for many people, especially on the on the standard diet when they're not eating as much whole foods or they're metabolically not doing that well. I think it's more valuable. And HOMA-IR requires you to have the fasting glucose and the insulin. So if you have both, you can calculate it, and it's pretty simple. We'll have it in the PDF as well, the calculation and how to do it, and the ranges. So there's something more actionable for you when you look at that, because a lot of the blood work stuff, people don't know how to actually interpret and use it. So I think this is useful for all of you. And essentially there's not much more to say about fasting glucose. Everyone knows that elevated blood sugar is harmful, and it's glycating and it causes inflammation, and especially that's why they give type 2 diabetics insulin, because it's that damaging. Otherwise they would end up dying because it is so severe, and especially with type 1 diabetics, right?
Yeah.
So that's
Exactly.
what I want to say.
And that's one of the biggest reasons how, if you're following our sequence, you can see why we talk about sugar, why we talk about carbs, and people don't realize how much sugar is in carbs and stuff like it. I mean, it's all relative. It's all important. And we're not saying don't do it. We're just saying be aware, so that you can take your health back into your own hands. And also I'm glad you brought up the HOMA-IR, because that's important as well. And nobody talks about that. Nobody. That's very important as well. So, yeah.
I think I forgot to mention the ranges, but blood glucose can actually swing quite a bit. It's very dependent. It's not just diet. It's also exercise, stress. All of that can cause a great variation on it, and especially when you're fasting, blood glucose can go very low. I think it's probably I have it go down to like 3.1 millimoles per liter or 2.9, close to that.
Really?
But I didn't feel bad. I just felt a bit off. So it can range, and I've had it above 6 too, but that was pre when I switched over to not eating carbs.
Yeah.
So it can spike, and I'd say it depends on your diet, because it varies on the populations, because what works on a standard population might not work on a keto population, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
a keto population probably has a bit wider range, because your body is producing all the glucose it needs. It can do it endogenously. You don't need to eat it. It's called gluconeogenesis for the more technical term. But
And another
you can see
topic
more
for another
variance
day.
in there.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
But
for sure.
but to be honest, a keto population doesn't have as much variation as a standard population, because when you actually measure it, there's a lot of spiking happening,
Okay.
and you don't get that picture when you're just measuring the fasting glucose. It can give you a false sense of picture when it's interpreted in the wrong way.
Yeah.
So I'd say like 4 to 6 millimoles per liter. Like you'd actually prefer to keep it below 6 millimoles per liter if you can, and doing it fasted. Below 3 is probably like it could be too low, or it depends. It depends where you're coming from. Like if you feel fine, then it's probably okay.
Probably okay. Yep. Yep.
Diabetic Association doesn't like it to go below 5, because we've had a talking to from the doctors when we go with. But
I think I'm below 5 right now.
we go with more of your scale, with us being, animal based and or me carnivore. We do go from the 4, like you said, from the 4.5 to the 6.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the doctors don't like it.
And I mean, that's a good range. It's something to aspire to. And again, going back to, I mean, we don't want to harp on the food or whatever, but I'll tell you what, you take your car and you start putting in, the wrong gas in your car, or the fuel that you're putting in your car, what happens? Right? We're no different. This body that we have is an engine, and to operate at optimal levels, you need to give it the right fuel, whatever that may be, right? And that can vary from individual to individual as well. We found one way that works great for us. Are we like that the whole time? Maybe not, but most of it. And that's what it's all about. What are you putting in this temple that you have been given this lifetime?
Yeah, and
Go back to the basics.
people don't realize that it actually varies. So when you're when you're being breastfed, like the requirements in there, like you actually get glucose, you get the fats, the fatty acids, ketones, and all of that. So it will change throughout life as you get older too. Like you might find that you actually need to eat more fatty foods, or just keep the carbohydrates lower, because your body just can't deal with it. So it is individual, and it's individual according to where you are too.
Yeah, great point. Great point. And different minerals and vitamins and stuff like that too, that your body might require at any specific time. And we will do a deep dive in that as well, so that you can understand, like, what are ketones, what are this, what are that, and that'll be coming right now. We're just starting right at the basics. Let's put your health back into your hands. That's what we're striving for with our episodes. Okay, so routine blood work. Now we've covered the 3 most important that we thought that was very important for you to understand. When you go in for your blood work, it's don't be afraid to ask for this stuff. And most panels that get ordered from a doctor, they are designed to detect disease. They're not designed to be proactive. They're designed to check the reactive side of the body. And if we were to, I don't even know how I'm going to explain this, but I think proactive on anything in your life is important, and probably the most important is your health, right? And how do you do this? Well, we just explained to you 3 different ways of doing it. Also, let's talk about the disconnect. Let's talk about the symptoms. Let's talk about, because so many different things have exactly the same symptoms. So when we're talking about that, like if you feel really tired, you feel like you're achy all over your body and stuff like that. Sometimes we think, oh no, we're getting a cold, or we're getting this, or we're getting that. One of the best ways to get back into touch with your body is what? Knowing what your body's doing. We talk about a glucose meter, just like wearing one of those. So you see, like when you spike and stuff like that, well, get a baseline. What's your baseline? And then start going from there. Like what is my fasting insulin? What is my fasting glucose? What is my A1C? And then that the fuel and stuff that you're putting in your body, your exercise, everything you're going to do, and then you go back and you get another one. At least now you're tracking.
Yeah, and you can even start it right now. Like you don't even
today.
Getting bloods tested is very useful, but you can do pattern matching. You can be observant. When you have an illness, usually it's temporary, right? It doesn't last for that long. Like when you catch a cold or you get an infection. But when you have the recurring symptoms happening after like a certain like time of day, or after you've done something, then that actually brings up the question, what are you doing? So maybe you have an afternoon crash that might have been because of the lunch you had. Maybe it was carb heavy. Just making those connections. Most people don't realize that. Or maybe you're not that food doesn't bode well with you. Like you might actually react to it. A lot of people can have issues with dairy, and they might react to it. Or maybe certain plant foods, like beans, or it depends, and you might react badly to it. Just be observant and just notice the patterns, and that's how you can actually work towards bettering your health.
Absolutely. And don't just use the bloody labels. Just because I don't know, I've known so many people that say, "Oh, I have IBS." Do you? And start asking those very important questions. Well, why? Why do I have IBS? Or different things like, oh, well, it's my genes, or it's this, or it's that. Well, you know what? Start asking those questions and reconnect with your body again. You only have one life. Take it back into your control.
Yeah, usually will.
Usually.
I was going to say, and just remember, when you do get your blood markers, it's only when you do get them back, it's only a snapshot of that frame and that time and it might, when you come back in a few months' time, it might be totally different. You've got to take into account the stresses that you're going on. Are you stressed? Are you, what happened that morning? It's, what's been happening over the last month. It's not just something that's going to be the same every time. It's, what happens today might be different from next time. Was there an accident on the way to get your bloods, or that sort of thing? Just it's a snapshot of that time and place for that period.
It's worth putting in the effort to actually make it consistent. I know it's annoying, but like it needs to be done for you to get an accurate picture of your health, because otherwise, like, there might be too many confounders, right? Like too many factors that influence the results. You don't want that. You want the actual, like, real picture that is actionable to you.
And the last thing you need to do, remember this: don't assume that your doctor is ordering all the blood work that they feel that you need, because that's not the case. And you can be sitting. Yeah,
I made that mistake a long time ago.
We all have. We've all been there.
I thought I was asking for all the relevant blood tests, but actually, when you're looking at the blood tests, no, it's very much lacking. A lot of people don't know that there are hundreds of blood markers. I think it's close to 1,000 probably.
Wow.
That you can test. So it's just insane, the things you can test. And we're only testing a small sliver of it, and we're missing a lot that's important.
Yeah.
Yeah. Most of the doctors just ask for the standard test, and it would be the same standard test that they ask for on every single patient. And unless you ask for that and you find out and ask for that extra testing, you're not going to get it.
Yeah. And that's not right. It's just not right. It's like, we do like the flu shot, or with dogs, we do a lepto shot and stuff like that. Well, you know what? What they do is that shot that they give you is only out like maybe 3 strains out of 100. Or it's just, and it's like, it's the same thing with your health,
And flu is a tricky virus too.
What's
it
that,
can recombine. Yeah, it can recombine, and okay. anyway, the science on that is just amazing. There's no way to really properly vaccinate against it because it's just how the nature of the thing. But yeah, I know
Exactly.
it's besides the point. But
It's like, okay, well, 10 people, this is the strain they got, so let's just take the majority and boom, that's what you're getting this year. And
Yeah.
and we'll do an episode on that as well from what we know. Of course, we're not doctors, we're not scientists or anything like that, but I'll tell you what, we read, we research, and we go down that rabbit hole, and we're not afraid to do that. And what we find, we are more than happy to bring to you. And so that you can go down that rabbit hole and you can do your own research as well. Because we know that everybody is as fed up with their health and the healthcare system because it's failing us. And that's all we're trying to do is just bring you some awareness. So let's wrap this one up. We'll do an episode recap. We talked about A1C, shows you a 90-day average. It doesn't show you everything that's happening within your body at any, like the fasting insulin. We talked about fasting insulin. We did some reference ranges as well. Routine panels are not, what's the word I want to use? With being as polite as I can be. Don't assume that your doctor is ordering all the blood work that you actually need. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. Your symptoms, reconnect with your body again. And the best way to do that is to have a baseline and then start building from there as well. And don't be afraid to ask for asking insulin, A1C, fasting glucose, and your HOMA-IR as well. So on that note, is there anything else you guys want to add before we close out this episode?
I would only add that, I think in this day and age, you need to be the advocate of your own health. If you're expecting someone else to do the work, you'll be sorely disappointed and it's not going to work out well. So, and it's not that hard, the amount of benefits you'll receive from that action, as we have received, all three of us, it's worth it. There's no question about
Absolutely.
it because health is the cornerstone, the pillar of everything, and it affects your job, it affects your performance, it affects how you enjoy life. So, we're focusing on that.
Yeah, I agree, 100%. Ash?
I'll probably echo with what you both have said, and yet no one's coming to save you except yourself. Ask those questions, and just you've got, like Hugo said, you've got to be the advocate for your own health. Research those ones and go in and ask for them. That's what I do. And if they're not going to give you them, find a new doctor.
That's a tough one. And actually, I'm glad you said that, Ash, because here in Canada, especially in Ontario, we have such a doctor shortage. Lots of people are afraid to do that. And when you have a doctor, you want to hang on to your doctor, whether they are subpar or not. And just because it's so hard to find a new doctor. At the same time, it's still your health. And just push for it, you don't necessarily have to find another doctor. You just keep asking and saying, I want this. Because it's all about you.
I'll hopefully eventually give in.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully.
And we are here to actually help you on that journey too.
Absolutely.
Because we are on it. We haven't actually finished, but we've done a lot, and it's like we're the experienced guides on the journey. Then I think that's the good energy here. So.
And we're no different than you. This is something in our lives triggered us and said, I've had enough. And it put us on a whole other trajectory of our health. And away we went, part of it was diet. Like I started out as a biohacker. And I was like, oh my gosh, why do I feel this way? I shouldn't be feeling this way. I'm young, I'm energetic, I work out, I'm strong. I thought I ate healthy, and all this other kind of stuff. And away I went down the journey. And on that note, if there's anything that you would like us to research or do a deep dive in, that you have an interest in, that you'd like to know more about, just put it in the comments. We read them all. We read all comments. And more often than not, even if there's hundreds of thousands of comments, we answer them. Because that's how important you are to us, and how grateful and how much we appreciate you for your support, and we want to give back to you. So with that said, our next episode, we will be talking about LDL, HDL, triglycerides, and non-HDL, was it? I believe it was. And we're going to go a little bit deeper into that as well. So on that note, thank you for watching. Always fun catching up, guys. Always.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like
Knowledge is power.
Yeah, there you go, right?
So true.
Yep, exactly. So take care. Talk soon. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.